interested in that, then like a lot of the stuff I say won't really make sense. So there. So I'm giving this a chance to actually um, connect and grow an audience. I'm willing to join live audio. Perfect. Okay. So I'm trying out different times, and the concept I want to talk about today is fear, guilt, shame, scarcity-based conditioning. These are all the different conditions that interfere with your ability to recognize when you've made a mistake on autopilot. You trigger shame script. The majority of us have been conditioned with these types of scripts where we go into a trance state when we're triggered by one of these things. You can tell when you're in a trance state because you're doing something that either you did as a child that was possibly adaptive at that time, but really largely is not adaptive in your current situation. Or you're doing something that your parents used to do that doesn't necessarily work in the current social, cultural, and psychological context in a science-based way. Like, we all know we shouldn't beat our kids, but when a child goes into a certain state and you feel ashamed and angry and you're triggered into your parenting, you don't think about the science and the data. You know that despite the fact that you'd be a lot healthier if you didn't get beaten, you possibly propagate it if you're triggered. So any type of fear-based conditioning, scarcity-based conditioning, essentially what that means is that these are cultural relics from a time when there was when we were in a lot more danger of being killed, honestly, social exile and various things. I mean, nowadays we have a lot of social stressors, but at the same time, anything in a scarcity-based mindset type of way, any negativity, any, judgment, and severe criticism isn't really adaptive. It's for teaching someone how to belong, how to grow, how to thrive, how to think, or how to process. Unfortunately, a lot of our schooling, especially if it's ego-based schooling like medical training, law training, business school training, a lot of it, because of the scarcity and hierarchy and the process through which we were trained, had embedded in it a culture of shame, guilt, fear, and scarcity-based conditioning. We all remember med school and being told that to look to the left and to the right, and only, one out of the three of us wouldn't be there in the next year. And we've been hearing that crap since pre-med. I was hearing that crap my freshman year at Harvard in Chem 5 and in Chem 7 in organic chem. Every time I was doing a test, I was applying for something, I was hearing that stuff. That's raw fear, guilt, shame, scarcity-based conditioning. We've been being triggered through all of medical training on one level or another. Now, what's happening now is, as a result, we have a physician suicide rate of 400 physicians a year. That's like a physician killing himself every day, and that would be 365, and then we have another 100 left over. Think about that. Think about where someone has to get to the point where they've accumulated all the success, or so they thought. All these years, they've done all this work, and they want to leave it, but they're either so afraid, they're so ashamed of how they are right now, they feel so guilty for not being happy, not being present, not being whatever it is that they imagined they would come through this process, but instead they're becoming this burned out, cynical, overly managed, overtrained secretary being told what to do by some GED. Think about that conditioning. And think about the fact that when you train someone to be ashamed, you hand them off to be managed by anyone. That person just triggers them, basically, and ignores them and lets them run scripts, and basically you dumb them down. You make them into automatons, highly skilled labor. That's the mechanism of wage slavery. But we rob it through our culture because our culture believes that you have to swap dollars for hours and you have to not enjoy work. They believe in a false work play dichotomy. All of that scarcity, all of that inability to appreciate the value of play, like taking children and trying to condition them to be anything but a child, anything but a naturally curious, exploring, learning ridiculously fast child that you'll be proud of for adapting unconditionally. Anything that would condition you to instead shame a child, guilt a child, devalue a child, just anything like that is fear-based conditioning that's been passed down somehow along the way. And anytime you're doing that, you've been triggered into it. Because if you were actually present and thinking about it, you would not do that. It would be clear as day that would be the last thing you would possibly want to do. Now I'm kind of wondering if it's still recording, because it's not telling me that anyone is in here, which could likely mean I'm just talking to myself, but I'm used to that, right? So I'm just hoping it's still recording. Anyway, the core concept is that there are things that there's enough abundance that there's no need for competition. You create, and you create from somewhere deep within, and what you create will be uniquely yours, and that will be the signal that attracts your specific tribe. Anyone that comes around trying to compete with you, they either have to copy or they need to get the hell out away from your orbit. Anyone coming at you with fear, guilt, shame, or any type of scarcity, any type of club, any crap like that, valuing of your ability to just reach deep within you and create something so magnificent that it transforms other people. Anything that gets in the way of your ability to be in your flow, and your ability to thrive, your ability to be positive, your ability to be present, your ability to be alive. Anything that interferes with any of that needs to get away from your sphere. Shove that off the table. Exclude it from your inner circles. Ignore it. It no longer exists. When you see it coming, you trigger a distraction intention. You shut it down. You don't let it trigger you. It can be present. It can be as present as it wants to be, but it just doesn't have to send you to the state of mind where you're unresourceful. And so think about it. To think that you paid $30,000 a year for someone to take you through fear-based conditioning, scarcity-based conditioning, and when and at the end of it, you have a bunch of people miserable and burned out, can't think for themselves because they've been so Pavloved, to the point that 400 doctors dropping a year, a doctor a day. Do the math. Look at the substance use rate in physicians. Look at how long you train someone, and not the data is coming out. They're like, oops, we trained doctor the wrong way. I mean, we were complaining about that the whole time. All us intuitives knew that it was pattern-based recognition, but it's adding fear, guilt, shame, and scarcity-based conditioning. Scarcity-based conditioning implicitly narrows your point of view. It decreases your ability to recognize abstract models, makes you each individual incident as one entity. So basically, you suffer from information overload, overwhelm. You become so concrete. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is becoming more abstract. The information is exploding exponentially. And you're being taught to recognize less abstract patterns through fear, guilt, shame, scarcity-based conditioning. And beyond that, when we learn it, we're not just learning it and then when we go home we leave it behind. We're propagating that onto our children. We come home and we're talking the scarcity language. We're talking about being, we're talking about not having time. We're talking about being too tired. And really, as physicians, we're talking about what we can't afford, what we don't have time to create, what we don't have energy to create, because we've been conditioned with this mindset. So now, as we come around and we're looking for an audience, it's important to create in a space of differentiation, so that it's the blue ocean concept. That's what they used to call it back in the day. But you got to create something from within you that is aligned with value, with your core values, that has your story, has you embedded in it. But at the same time, you don't want to target an audience that is scarce. You don't want to target a dependent audience. You don't want to limit the development of your tribe by creating fear-based marketing, fear-based, scarcity-based, urgency-based stuff that hammers their cortisol levels up. That's inauthentic. You can use identification and intrinsic motivation. If you've been through fear, guilt, shame, and scarcity-based conditioning, you're going to have wounds that still respond to it. You're still triggerable. As such, you're having transfer and capture with clients, patients, your worldview, your interaction with the universe. If you've had trauma, you want to go through and fix those wounds so that you're able to be conscious in those conceptual spaces without negative emotions being triggered. That's what I do with cognitive program restructuring. I do different frameworks so that you can recognize when triggered, and then from there, you can spot the thing triggering you, interact with it less. You can set a set of intentional behaviors for the trigger point, and you basically become more intentional. That's literally the mechanism of increasing your self-esteem, which in turn increases your ability to tolerate uncertainty, which basically is the definition of stress relief. You become more abstract, the thinker. But it literally means you have to pull back a bit from the physician mindset and pull into an entrepreneurial mindset. You have to get more abstract. You have to undo a lot of the medical school conditioning, a lot of fear, guilt, shame, and scarcity-based conditioning we underwent in medical school. You got to back away from that. You got to develop a more abstract mindset, a growth mindset, instead of a fixed mindset, to use Carol Dweck's metaphor. But yeah, so that's me explaining fear, guilt, shame, scarcity-based conditioning, how it applies to physicians, and how recognizing it allows you to reintroduce passion, value, clarity, vision, mission, purpose to your life. So, thank you for listening.